Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Stutzman and welcome back to the Millcreek Government Channel. Oceans, lakes, and waterway trash ranks as one of the most serious pollution problems choking our planet Earth. Far more than an eyesore, a rising tide of marine debris threatens human health, wildlife, communities, and economies around the world. Our oceans and lakes face many challenges, but trash should not be one of them. Lake and streamside trash is entirely preventable, and the data collected through litter cleanups are part of the solution. The International Coastal Cleanup is the world's largest volunteer effort on behalf of the ocean, lake, and waterway health. Spearheading this massive marine litter cleanup for the Erie area is Jake Moore and Brittany Preshak. Jake is the environmental planner for the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection under the Coastal Resources Management Program, while Brittany is the sustainability coordinator for Erie County. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, Thanks for having us.
Well, we have a lot to dive into, so to speak, which is a bad pun, but we have a lot to dive into, and I actually just want to get right into it because International Coastal Cleanup is right around the corner.
That's right. And that it is.
When we prepare for this all year long, every single year, so, I'm very excited. It is one of my favorite cleanups of the year. So, Jake, I just want to start with you. What is International Coastal Cleanup, and give us the date and time?
So, Jesse, the International Coastal Cleanup is the world's largest volunteer-driven effort across the world. So every site coordinator, every trash bag that's donated, it's all volunteer-driven. So the cleanup occurs across the world in about 95 to 100 different countries with over 6,000 people involved. And it's held the third Saturday of September each year, and this year it'll be September 16th, 2017. It's held from 9 to noon on the same day across the globe. So from 9 to noon on that third Saturday, folks are picking up trash, taking data on that trash, which will eventually be used for further outreach and education.
And the one thing I want our viewers to note and to realize is you can't forget this date because we put it on the Millcreek Township calendar every single year. So even if you forget to write it down right now, if you've got your Millcreek Township calendar, you're not going to forget the date. And then you've got a lot of sites that actually partake in this. How many sites do you have, and is that list still growing?
It is. So we have anywhere from 17 to 20 different sites in a given year, depending on site coordinator availability and interest and such. And we cover almost the entire county. So it's focused on the Great Lakes watershed, but we still dive into French Creek watershed a little bit with sites in Edinburgh Lake and the outlet of Edinburgh Lake at Mallory Run. So we go from Springfield Township right at the Ohio line to Northeast Township all the way down to Edinburgh, with several thousand volunteers participating annually through schools, organizations, and nonprofit groups.
That is a lot of sites, and it really does make a difference. I know Millcreek Township, we host the site at Bridger Park, which is right behind the Millcreek Mall, and we get a great turnout every year, and we're pretty much brand new to holding it. We've been doing it about maybe 2-3 years now, but the thing I do like about all the sites that you have listed is that anybody can pretty much find a cleanup in their own backyard.
That they can. There's a cleanup in almost every township along the lake shore, and if you're not on the lake shore, there are cleanups up to the Lake Erie watershed, and like I said, down to Edinburgh Lake. So in the majority of the communities or townships, we have a cleanup site.
Yeah, you can find something anywhere. So when and where did this effort first begin?
So it first began with a research study off the coast of Texas in 1985, where some university professors and students got involved to tally how much trash is entering the Great Lakes, or not the Great Lakes, the Gulf of Mexico at that location. So they found out that there was a tremendous amount of plastic and marine debris entering the Gulf of Mexico, and in turn began this International Coastal Cleanup in 1986 with 12 different sites along the Texas coastline near Corpus Christi, Texas. So now that's kind of grown to over 6,000 sites across the world. Over 95 countries participate annually, and to date we've had millions and millions of volunteers throughout the course of the last 31 years participate and help clean up our global waterways.
I think that's really special, and I think the fact that it started as such a grassroots effort, and then again Erie in Pennsylvania, and we've adopted this. So when did this come to Pennsylvania and to our area?
So it came to PA quite a while ago. Presque Isle State Park was actually kind of the forefront of the International Coastal Cleanup in PA, as they had been doing the cleanup for several years prior to it becoming a larger volunteer-driven effort across the county. So the whole effort across the county started in 2003 with the help of a small group of partnerships and collaborators from the Department of Environmental Protection, DCNR and Presque Isle State Park, Erie County, and other nonprofits, and has since grown to about 18 or 20 sites throughout the county. So Presque Isle State Park was really the integral player at the beginning to get things rolling.
And then you guys collect this data, and I know we've got these little tally sheets here, and we'll talk about those in a second. Yeah, why don't you hold one of those up? We've got these tally sheets here, and so we collect this data, and this data is really staggering. So we started in 2003 here in Pennsylvania. Do you want to share some of those statistics of what we've collected? I know every single year you add it to the cumulative number, but then you also have a separate number for each year. So whatever you're more comfortable sharing. Again, either way, these statistics are staggering for how much litter is really out there.
It is staggering, and in one given year we have anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 volunteers. An average amount or weight of trash that we pick up varies between 4,000 and 6,000 pounds. Last year we had 1,800 volunteers. We picked up over 5,000 pounds of trash, and between the streams and the lakeside we had volunteers walk over 40 miles in that 3-hour period picking up trash. Now, since 2003, we've collected over 127,000 pounds of trash from the Lake Erie shoreline and waterways. So it's an incredible amount.
And that is just litter. I mean, that's not, and that's litter in the waterways. That's not,
exactly.
Maybe a dumpster or, roadway littering. But I mean, I think that number in and of itself, and it's a good workout for the day. I mean, we're walking a lot of miles when we do those litter cleanups. So, and what are some of those top 5 items you have seen in Erie since day one?
So the top 5 items don't normally change a whole lot. We have cigarette butts is always the top item. The second items tend to flip-flop between plastic cigar tips, straws, and stirs. And then just like plastic beverage bottles and plastic bags. Those are typically the top 5. The number 1 item doesn't ever change. The set 2 through 5 items, they typically do change and vary a little bit, but normally it's cigar tips, cigarette butts, plastic beverage bottles and bags, and then an assortment of plastic pieces and microplastics.
And we see a lot of those. I mean, the cigarette butts, I think, are so tedious to pick up. Sometimes you're just on your hands and knees. Before I even leave the parking lot, I have a bag full of cigarette butts. So, and actually you've brought a nice prop with you here today.
I have. So these are cigarette butts that we collected, or I didn't collect, but volunteers collected during the International Coastal Cleanup off of Presque Isle State Park. And this is off of a 3-hour period off of one beach on Presque Isle State Park. The volunteers picked those up. There's a little over 2,000 cigarette butts in there, because we use this as an educational piece, and I have people ask, well, how many cigarette butts are in there? And it's like a little game to get them to guess how many are picked up.
So if they watch this video, they're out of the running for guessing.
They could be, yes.
That's a lot. I mean, like I said, what are some alternatives that, if you are a smoker, what are some alternatives instead of just throwing your litter, your cigarette butts and littering them?
Some of the alternatives are being implemented across the county, such as cigarette butt litter receptacles, and a lot of the work that Brittany's done with Keep America Beautiful have had these installed across the county. So Brittany, if you have more to add on that.
Yeah, so there's a number of cigarette butt collection containers that are downtown Erie. They're on the peninsula, and actually the peninsula has recently implemented a couple of non-smoking beaches. And they're creating these sort of areas for smoking with the collection containers. That way it's pretty convenient. If you're going to smoke a cigarette, it's right there to dispose of. And then recently we are starting to roll out a couple of, they're called ballot bins. And so a better way to engage people who are smokers to, instead of toss their butt on the ground, to sort of vote with their butt. So we've got some fun questions on the containers, and they can say yes or no or pick A or B depending on their preferences. But we're going to roll those out across at the peninsula, as well as some of our parks across Erie County. So you can look out for those.
So very interactive way to not litter and to find an appropriate receptacle. And I know that actually we can collect these during International Coastal Cleanup. We actually have some of those cigarette butt receptacles, not the interactive ones, but the regular ones at our parks. And even when our parks are non-smoking, people get there and maybe they're driving with a cigarette and then they arrive to our park. So we do have those receptacles there to extinguish them as soon as you get to the park. When we do take those and when we have those in the receptacles, we can send them back to TerraCycle, and then they'll be recycled and made into park benches and picnic tables and really reused and recycled. So I just wanted to touch on the cigarette butts, since again that is the number one thing that is collected on the beach and in the waterways every single year. But Jake, what about some of the most unusual items that you've either seen yourself or people have reported to you that are collected?
So we've had some pretty interesting and peculiar items come about from our Lake Erie watershed. One year, a group of students found a litter of kittens. Another year, some folks found a Jeep in one of the ravines along the Lake Erie watershed. Last year we had a group of kids, I think along McDaniel Run, they found a crisp $10 bill and a working adult tricycle. So you never know what you're going to find, but it's always interesting and it's always funny to see some of the things that come back.
Yeah. And when we're there, we've got a few props here on the table, some gloves and plastic bags and whatnot, and we'll get into that. But we can, of course, we're cleaning up, so we're going to throw some things away in the trash bin. And when we're collecting, there are some things that we can recycle. Brittany, do you want to touch on some of those things that can be recycled versus not?
Yeah, so recycling during a litter cleanup is a little difficult. The reason being is plastic bottles and cans that we want to recycle, or glass even, needs to be pretty clean and liquid free in order to really make it worth recycling. And so when you're on a litter cleanup, usually those items are rather dirty. They could be broken, anything like that. But if you happen to come across a full plastic bottle, a full can, aluminum can, or even a full glass bottle, no broken pieces, you can empty the dirt out of it or the liquid out of it, and you can recycle those items. But we do want to avoid trying to recycle those small microplastics. Just because it's plastic doesn't make it recyclable.
Right. And Brittany, you mentioned microplastics, and I also want to point to the very nice mural behind us, which also do have some of those microplastics on it. But Brittany, why don't you tell our viewers, if you don't know what microplastics are, how would you describe those?
Sure. So microplastics are usually any type of plastic that's smaller than maybe about the size of a quarter, and they're broken pieces of plastic. When plastic starts to degrade, it doesn't actually decompose, it just breaks into smaller pieces. And so we end up with all these little bits and pieces of plastic. You find a lot of them in different colors, different sizes, different shapes, depending on how that item broke or was degraded. And so they end up they're easily lost in the sand. So usually you might find some now, and then in a couple of weeks more of it'll come out as the wind blows the sand or as people walk by. But as you can see, pretty much any of these tiny pieces of broken plastic, these are all microplastics and are not recyclable. And I mean, honestly, sometimes the fish or birds end up eating these. Absolutely. Yep. Plastic bags are another problem too. You'll get those, find those in fish stomachs. And so we got to keep them out of the water as best we can. So usually if you recycle the item before it becomes litter, that's the best option, because it keeps all of that environmental impact from happening.
Right, right. I think a lot of these times we associate, again, either maybe the fish or birds eating them on, in the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean or off maybe some of those islands, but we have that same problem here in the Great Lakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we do.
And then Jake, do you want to touch on this really nice little art piece we have here?
Yeah, so this is an art piece produced by a local student, and it was given to Presque Isle State Park as kind of a thank you and a gift from that student. And these are all items that they picked up off the shoreline at Presque Isle State Park. So you've got the state park outlined in plastic cigar tips and green straws coming out as the neck of Presque Isle. You have, a plastic squirt gun, caps and lids, a gum wrapper, just several different lip balm, a measuring scoop. Just You name it and it's out there. So there's plenty of litter to pick up, and they're actually working on an art exhibit / marine debris exhibit for next year at the Tom Ridge Center, where they'll be showcasing more art projects such as that.
Okay, so if any students are watching and you think you have a creative eye and a creative talent for doing artwork pieces like this, definitely reach out to Jake. I'm sure he'll want to keep it on file, and we can use it in our next show maybe. And Jake, the other thing I wanted to touch on, we did talk about the tally sheets a little bit, but why are these numbers so important to you? And are people really good about keeping track of these during the litter cleanups?
They are, and the reason that these numbers are so important is because when we go out and we pick up trash and we don't take numbers, it's hard to quantify how much litter are we getting, how much trash is really being out there, because a lot of times people throw that out the window or dump it out their car, and it's out of sight, out of mind. But when you quantify that and you can say, this is how many pounds of trash that we picked up, it hits home with people. And maybe with those numbers, we can build some value in these recreational areas and the water resources that we utilize every day to get people to change their behaviors and reduce their impact on the environment by just not littering. Throw it in a trash receptacle at the gas station or the supermarket or at your home. Don't just dump it out in the parking lot.
Right. And if I can add real quick, the other thing that's really nice about collecting data is like Jake had already mentioned, we know what those top items are. And so by understanding really what is the most common items, we can do targeted education or cleanup efforts to specifically get rid of those items. So if cigarette butts are our biggest problem, which we've seen that year after year, that's why you've started to see more cigarette butt collection containers, because we know that that's a problem. People who smoke don't want to use the trash can. They're worried it might catch it on fire, so we need an alternative. And so by implementing something like that, we can also track how well that's being used and if we're actually seeing a decrease.
Right. Oh, and that would be nice to see a decrease.
Definitely.
That would be the ultimate goal. And then there's also trends, like you were mentioning, we've seen just again, where we clean up Bridger Park, of course we see regular cigarette butts, but I had picked up something and I actually didn't know what it was, and somebody said, oh, that goes to one of those vape or electronic cigarettes. And so I think we might start to see that as the new trend, as well as maybe some of those leftover containers from the vape or the e-cigarettes.
Okay.
So just like I said, a changing trend, but we'll still see cigarette butts, but we might start to see that kind of vary in form too. And then, Jake, the global figures, really do mirror what Erie County collects locally, right?
They really do. The top 5 items globally for 2016 were cigarette butts, plastic beverage bottles, plastic bottle caps, food wrappers, and grocery bags. And that's largely what we see in Erie County. Those numbers change a little bit, but even across the world, cigarette butts every year is hands down the #1 item collected. And it's astronomical at how many we actually do find.
Right. And Brittany, there are a ton of people and organizations and partnerships you both have formed that really help make this day possible. I definitely want to put a list on the TV so we don't forget everybody, but do you want to touch about how crucial some of those partnerships have been?
Yeah, absolutely. As Jake had mentioned, we've got 17 to 18 different sites just across Erie County, and it takes a great group of volunteers to help us not only coordinate the efforts at each of those sites, but volunteering year after year. We've got partners that help us promote the event, to recruit more volunteers. We use our Facebook page to do that, and so you can see a list on our website that lists who are the current coordinators, a lot of our partners, and we definitely couldn't do this effort without them.
The one partner I do want to give a specific mention to, because they pick up all of the trash at the very end of the cleanup, is Waste Management.
Absolutely.
Yes, they do. They have worked with us very easily, hand in hand, for the last now 15 years to pick up the trash at all the locations. And their deal is that if you participate in the coastal cleanup, they'll provide a free trash pickup of that dumpster the Monday after the cleanup event. So the trash will sit there for the rest of Saturday, Sunday, and then their crew comes out Monday and they pick it up. And if we go out, because I typically travel to sites the week after to make sure everything's cleaned up and taken care of, if there's something awry at a site, they are on it. They are very quick to respond and great to work with.
Right. And I just wanted to give them a special thank you, just because we all know, being in the industry, how expensive it is to send these things to the landfill, or to, just the gasoline it takes to haul some of these things to the recycling sorting facilities. So I think the fact that they picked that up for us at no additional cost is extremely beneficial to the day.
Absolutely.
That it is very, very important.
And then I want to kind of switch gears here, and I want to talk about the impact, the importance of clean water, and then also of being safe while we're doing this day. So, Brittany, what are the impacts of people littering out your car window, into a stream, into the roadway? What are the impacts?
Yeah, I mean, other than the basic one of just being unsightly, seeing all that trash and that litter, I don't think a lot of people realize that that litter actually goes downstream. So no matter where you are, it ends up in the water somewhere. And being so close to the Great Lakes, to Lake Erie here, that is our biggest impact, is everything ends up down there. That's why the peninsula has a lot of trash they pick up year after year through doing Adopt a Beach as well as ICC. So just understanding that long-term impact of everything just kind of flowing downstream. But on top of that, you've got any kind of contamination from the types of items you're dumping, if it's used oil, if it's tires. Tires we worry about with public health, they're mosquito breeding grounds. There's a lot of impacts to just leaving trash lying out. And with that, like you said, besides litter just causing an aesthetic problem, it can actually clog storm sewer drains, which again, we just had a recent flooding event in Millcreek Township where some of our storm sewer drains were clogged. So again, to prevent flooding on during heavy rainstorms, we want to make sure that we're not littering. And then from a municipality standpoint, these are really expensive for us to undertake by ourselves. Yes.
So, we can get into how much it costs and how much labor is involved, but these are, really expensive ventures without help.
Yeah, they can be, especially because you mentioned the great help that Waste Management does by collecting that trash. I can't imagine what it would cost us to have to dispose of all of that at the landfill if we didn't have such a great partner with them.
And so it's so important to reduce all of this. Why?
Well, when we talk about the recycling, a lot of our recycling, as I mentioned, it becomes those microplastics, it becomes unrecyclable and unusable. And so if you actually recycle it at the beginning, that's one way to make sure, instead of it becoming litter and having to go to the landfill anyway, it actually has a second life. But even before that, that reduce, reuse, recycle, I'm sure everyone knows the 3 R's. We learned that in elementary school. That is one of the biggest things that we need to think about, is just reducing your impact by kind of cutting back on how much you're consuming, thinking about how much trash you're actually creating, trying to reuse a lot of things. Use reusable water bottles instead of buying a bottled beverage all the time. Thinking about reusable plastic bags instead of use the shopping bags instead of all those plastic bags. A lot of things, just kind of realize the impact that comes after consuming all of those items.
Right, and so those, you just touched on it. Those are a lot of ways that people can really take it upon themselves. And Jake, you mentioned this phrase earlier, and you have to change your behavior. You have to change your method of thinking. So if you are used to flicking your cigarette butt out the window, again, use an ashtray or one of those portable ashtray or cigarette snuffers that they hand out for your vehicles now. So again, changing your behavior, changing your mind, going to the grocery store, like you said, using products with less packaging or less plastic, that would all help.
That's exactly it, and it's just about changing perceptions and behavior on why we throw things away the way we do, why we recycle what we do, in hopes of improving those efforts down the road. Some of the other things why it's important to litter are wildlife and aquatic populations within the Great Lakes. Many of our streams that are impaired are typically impaired from siltation or stormwater runoff. A lot of these increased flows of stormwater, they're carrying that litter into your storm drain at the end of your driveway or at the end of your subdivision or block within the city or one of the local townships. So if it goes down into that storm drain, it enters the municipal storm sewer system and will discharge directly to the nearest waterway, where it causes problems for fish and wildlife and a host of other things that live and utilize kind of these riparian or near shore areas.
Right. And Erie's such a big tourism town for fishing, for boating. I mean, those things can really, impact the rest of, you know, the trout tourism or, you know, summer vacationers, or, you know, like you said, it just really, it starts with the flora and fauna, and then it can just move up the food chain as a problem.
Exactly.
And then Brittany, the last really, really big thing I want to talk about, we're already running out of time here. People are cleaning up along this stream. We do this in all sorts of weather, rain or shine. I have been out there when it's pouring. It's in September, so it's usually a very nice, sunny, warm day. But on the opposite end, could be very, very hot. So do you want to talk about some of the safety precautions our volunteers should take when they come out to the litter cleanup?
Absolutely. And we have all of our coordinators do a quick safety talk at the beginning of the event. That way everyone has it on their mind. We talk about the buddy system to begin with. Never go out alone. Always have one other person with you. That way, if something were to happen, there's someone else to go for help. But on top of that, we ask our volunteers to wear gloves. It just helps protect your hands as you're going into brush and stuff, as you're trying to pick up litter off the ground. We do safety vests, those especially along roadways, just so that you're more visible in traffic. Other things to think about, of course, is bug spray and sunscreen. Those are obviously important as well, depending on which area you're in. And we actually do a lot of work in the waterways themselves, in our creeks and our streams, and so a good pair of rubber boots that have nice soles on them that you won't slip and fall. And we do ask our volunteers to try and avoid climbing up the banks. Our banks are not always stable, and so you never know if it'll actually give out on you as you're trying to climb out. And so we do try and make sure that everyone's as safe as possible.
And I know we have some items here on the table, like you said, vests, garbage bags, gloves, and I know what I try to bring for my volunteers. I bring extra towels in case they fall in the water. You have waders, we have hand pickers we can show everybody, and I also bring hand sanitizer at the end, because usually, even though you are wearing gloves, it is a pretty grimy day.
Yes,
so
it is.
we are just about out of time, so what I want everyone to do is just be able to reach out to you to show you that they're interested. So do you have a website and a phone number that they can contact you?
So we have a website and a phone number that folks can contact, and a Facebook page. So if people want to volunteer, we'd really appreciate it if they register. It's at nie.goerie.com/coastal-cleanup. You can register right on the website, or we also have a Facebook page, and if you search Erie International Coastal Cleanup, that'll pop up right away, and you can visit the Facebook page and get in hold of somebody there. Or you can call me at the Tom Ridge Center. I'll answer the phone and register you through the website. It's 814-217-9634, and we'd love to have you out.
We would. Thank you so much for joining us today. Viewers, we would love to have you out. You're going to see all three of us out there at International Coastal Cleanup. For some reason, if you can't make International Coastal Cleanup, there are other litter cleanup events throughout the year. The Great American Cleanup, the annual Presque Isle Cleanup, Great Lakes Adopt a Beach program, and then sometimes townships hold their own cleanup, and they usually tell them to give those dates and times and locations to Brittany ahead of time. So you can volunteer at any time throughout the year with any cleanup. We just want to see you out there in the waterways getting your hands dirty with us too. So viewers, thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, have a wonderful day.
You're watching the Millcreek Government Channel, powered by WQLN Public Media.